A 12-year-old boy, Tyrese Porter, entered a bank to deposit his birthday money. What should have been a proud moment became embarrassing until his mother arrived and altered the situation without raising her voice. Tyrese Porter wasn't typically a nervous child. He was quick with a joke, fast on the court, and intelligent enough to keep up with children 2 grades older. This morning, a clammy feeling gripped his hands, and his breath came in short bursts as he gazed up at the large glass doors of Crestmark Bank on Fremont Avenue in Tempe, Arizona. He had just celebrated his 12th birthday, and this marked his first independent deposit. The envelope within his hoodie pocket contained precisely $220. It was birthday money, a mix of fives, tens, and a couple of 20s. Nothing extravagant. For him, this was the culmination of months of effort, supported by Aunt Claudine, Uncle Leo, and his older cousin Ronald, who worked evening shifts at the auto shop. His mother, Dr. Alicia Monroe, had brought him to this location but remained in the car, offering him a final piece of encouragement through the open window. "You got this, baby. Walk in there confidently, as if you belong. Because you do." He nodded, attempting to conceal the tremor in his legs. The sun shone brightly from mid-morning. The sneakers, still dusty from a pickup game the previous night, made a slight squeak on the floor as he entered. The bank was peaceful, not deserted, but peaceful in a relaxed Saturday atmosphere. A man wearing a button-down shirt was at the kiosk, looking at his phone. An older couple occupied the waiting chairs, quietly discussing some paperwork. Only one woman was in line at the counter, signing a document, with her toddler chewing on a deposit slip nearby. Tyrese positioned himself behind her and attempted to regulate his breathing. He glanced down at the envelope, verifying his handwriting on the exterior. "T. Porter, Savings." He had rehearsed his signature 3 times the previous night, not because he was required to, but because it seemed like the appropriate action. He observed the digital cue board advance to the subsequent number. The woman and her toddler departed. The bank teller did not even lift her head as she announced, "Next." Tyrese moved forward. "Hello," he said, polite and firm, just as his mother had instructed. "I'm here to deposit into my savings." The teller's eyes lifted slowly. Her name tag indicated she was Margaret Delaney. She appeared to be in her late 50s, with silver-streaked brown hair and a largely unchanging, tight-lipped expression. She offered no smile, no greeting in return. Instead, her gaze immediately fell upon the envelope he held. "And where did you obtain that sum of money?" Tyrese blinked, uncertain if he had understood her question correctly. "It's my birthday money," he stated, raising the envelope slightly. "My aunt and my cousin had given it to me. I simply wanted to deposit it." "Uh-huh," she responded, interrupting him. She bent forward across the counter, examining the bills as if they were questionable. "Do you possess a state-issued ID?" Tyrese paused. "No, Mom, just my school ID and my account number. My mom opened it with me last summer." Margaret released a slow breath through her nose. With the tone adults use when they've had enough of dealing with someone, she shifted her gaze toward a nearby colleague, then returned her attention to Tyrese. "I'm going to need to verify all of this," she stated. "You could be anyone, and this could be anything." Tyrese's chest tightened. He looked down at the envelope again, as if it might have somehow changed since he walked in. But it was still just an envelope, still his name, still the money he'd been given, fair and square. "I can give you the account number," he said. His voice remained calm, but it softened. Margaret did not respond. Instead, she turned to pick up the phone near her station. "I'm calling the manager to assist. Please wait." The man at the kiosk had now turned to observe. The older couple whispered something, their eyes moving toward the boy at the counter. Tyrese felt his face flush, and he tried to avoid looking up. He reached into his backpack for the small blue bank booklet his mom had given him. It didn't seem promising, but Margaret no longer focused on him. She was engaged in a phone conversation, occasionally looking his way with a tense expression. Tyrese felt a knot in his throat. This wasn't the plan. However, the moment she ended the call, things began to deteriorate quicker than he could manage. Margaret placed the phone down with a gentle click and directed a sharp look at Tyrese, as if assessing him for a situation he hadn't agreed to. "Someone will be with you in a minute," she stated briefly. She then focused on her computer screen, her fingers tapping as if he'd disappeared from her view entirely. Tyrese stood there, uncertain whether to speak or simply wait. He looked down at the envelope again. It wasn't trembling, but his hands felt rigid now, as if they didn't quite belong to him. The lobby felt colder, not in temperature, but in feeling. It was as if the atmosphere changed when she asked that first question. The man from the kiosk was still observing. One of the tellers was situated a few windows down. There was no verbal communication, but their eyes consistently averted, quickly glancing away each time Tyrese made eye contact. A tall man wearing a dark gray tie emerged from a hallway located behind the counter. His name tag identified him as Kenneth Flores, branch manager. He moved towards Tyrese deliberately, maintaining a polite demeanor but with a reserved customer service expression that concealed his thoughts. "Hi there," Kenneth stated. "Are you attempting to make a deposit?" Tyrese affirmed with a nod. "Yes, sir, into my savings account." He says it's birthday money. Margaret spoke from her desk without looking up. Kenneth briefly glanced at her, then returned his attention to Tyrese. "Do you have an account number on you?" Tyrese provided the small blue booklet and the slip with his account info. Kenneth took them and began typing into a tablet. "I don't have a state ID," Tyrese added, his voice quieter now. "Just school, I'm 12. Kenneth paused for half a second. 12? And you came in by yourself?" Kenneth nodded once. "Yes, sir," his mom said. "Okay, can I take a look at the money?" Tyrese offered the envelope. Kenneth opened it with care, as if handling explosives, and began counting the bills directly at the counter. Meanwhile, Margaret commented, "I just thought we should be cautious. You never know these days." Her words felt like a sharp rebuke. Tyrese stopped moving. He wasn't sure if a response was expected. He felt uneasy, but remained still. The issue wasn't precisely her words, but the manner in which she delivered them. It felt as though he was being assessed as a risk, a potential danger, an issue requiring control. Kenneth remained silent, completing his count before turning to Tyrese. 220, correct?" Tyrese confirmed with a nod. "Okay, I need a moment. I'll verify the account." As Kenneth moved away, Tyrese stood still, the envelope no longer in his grasp. A constriction formed in his throat. He resisted the urge to cry, unwilling to do so in the presence of unfamiliar people. He attempted to recall what his mom always said: "You're not the problem, baby. You're the reason someone else gets to grow today." However, at that moment, it didn't feel like anyone was learning anything. A woman a few spots behind in line appeared as though she might speak. She opened her mouth, then simply looked at her phone instead. When Kenneth returned, he handed Tyrese the slip confirming the account and deposit total. "You're all set," he said. "It's gone through," Tyrese whispered, thanking him. As he turned to leave, Margaret quietly added, "Better safe than sorry." The comment wasn't loud, but it was audible. Tyrese halted his departure. His ears burned once more. He desired to leave, yet also felt compelled to say something, anything at all. Instead, he simply reversed direction toward the exit, suppressing the words he couldn't voice. However, beyond those doors, a pair of eyes had been observing, and they weren't about to remain silent any longer. The glass door opened slowly, and a woman entered, her presence immediately altering the atmosphere. Dr. Alicia Monroe commanded attention without speaking. Her blazer was a crisp slate blue with subtle pinstripes, and her heels clicked across the polished floor with purpose. Alicia carried herself with an air of assuredness. Heads turned, some driven by curiosity, others by a natural response. She wasn't seeking attention. However, she was here for her son. The moment she entered, Tyrese noticed her. His shoulders tightened, not with fear, but with something akin to relief. It was like finding the handle on a locked door. Margaret looked up. Her expression tightened briefly, as if anticipating this moment. Alicia didn't immediately go to the counter. Instead, she walked directly to her son, placed a gentle hand on his back, and spoke to him, her voice low enough for only him to hear. "You okay?" Tyrese nodded, though not convincingly. She refrained from pushing the matter. Instead, she shifted her attention to the counter, making eye contact with Margaret, then Kenneth, who had returned, perceiving a change in the atmosphere. "Good morning," Alicia stated, her voice steady and composed. "I'm Dr. Alicia Monroe. Tyrese is my son." Kenneth adjusted his throat and offered a brief, polite smile. "Yes, ma'am, everything is handled. His deposit has been processed." "That isn't what I'm here to discuss," she responded. Her voice remained level. There was no need to raise it. Each word broke the silence. "I observed my son enter here independently today, displaying pride and readiness to accomplish something adults frequently advise children to do, to be responsible. Rather than receiving guidance, he experienced questioning, doubt, and humiliation." Margaret's face reddened. "Ma'am, I was simply adhering to protocol. Your protocol does not involve accusing a child of suspicious conduct because he arrived with cash on his birthday." Kenneth intervened promptly. "Dr. Monroe, I want to assure you that was not our goal." Alicia turned slightly, her hands remaining still at her sides. "Are you aware of how many accounts my company maintains with this bank, Mr. Flores?" Kenneth moved slightly. "I understand there are three. Langford Innovations, your personal account, and Monroe Education Group." "That is correct," she confirmed. "I have directly instructed more than 300 young students in this city regarding financial literacy, predominantly black and brown, many of whom are entering environments where they face immediate judgment. Therefore, I am not unfamiliar with this discussion." A silence descended upon the lobby. Even the toddler from earlier had become quiet. Margaret began to speak, but Alicia raised her hand, not to cut her off, but to momentarily suspend the discussion. "This extends beyond just Tyrese. This concerns every child who enters a place like this and is told, whether subtly or overtly, that they don't belong, that they must demonstrate something that no one else is required to demonstrate. Do you request state identification from every child, or just mine?" Margaret's voice lowered. "That isn't equitable. It's unjust to impose that burden on a 12-year-old simply because you presume something about him before he even greets you." Alicia retreated slightly and indicated her son. He entered the space, behaving as we instruct parents to guide their children. Rather than receiving recognition for his efforts, he was perceived as a potential problem. The elderly couple in the waiting area briefly looked at each other. One of them offered a deliberate nod. While not everyone appeared at ease, they seemed alert. Tyrese observed his mom with wide eyes. It wasn't simply the content of her words that surprised him, but also her delivery. Calm, deliberate. She didn't raise her voice, nor did she seek sympathy. She spoke truthfully before those who were present. "I'm not requesting an apology," Alicia stated finally. "I am requesting awareness." Yet, as the impact of her words became apparent, Tyrese remained silent, as something within him still felt the need to complete what he began. A brief stillness fell over the room. Kenneth stood rigidly behind the counter, his hands clasped together, reminiscent of a school principal delivering a lecture. Margaret's gaze had dropped, focused on the laminated calendar close to her keyboard. The branch was silent, unusually so. However, Tyrese wasn't noticing any of that. He remained looking at his mom. She hadn't spoken loudly. She didn't need to. The way she held herself was striking, as if each word she selected was a brick intentionally set. He understood she was upset. He sensed it in the tightness of her shoulders. Beyond that, she possessed a protective, steady, and unwavering nature. He aspired to emulate those qualities. "Tyrese," she stated, turning slightly. He paused, surprised by her question. He had assumed she would manage the situation as she typically did, sheltering him and resolving issues to spare him involvement. However, she was now presenting him with an option. He glanced at the adults behind the counter. He observed the woman who had made him feel like an outsider. He glanced back at his mom, who stood there as a barrier between him and a world that hadn't yet learned how to properly interact with him. He inhaled deeply. "I came in here to complete the tasks adults had instructed me to do," he stated. His voice faltered slightly, but he persevered. "Preserve my money, manage it independently, demonstrate responsibility." His hand clenched around the unused envelope still folded in his pocket. "I wasn't anticipating any festivities or the like," he added. Margaret looked up at him now, Her expression had softened. I had everything needed: my belongings, my account information, and my school ID. I remained composed throughout, even when I couldn't grasp the reason for the different treatment. He didn't explicitly state it was due to my race, wasn't necessary. The atmosphere made the assumption clear. I simply wanted to deposit my money in the bank, Tyrese concluded. That was my only wish. He turned to Kenneth. My hope is that no one else experiences something similar. Kenneth nodded slowly. You're right, and I'm sorry you were made to feel that way. Alicia listened, raising her chin slightly. We should have done better, he added. Margaret, who had been quiet, finally spoke. I misread the situation. I did, and I'm sorry, Tyrese. Her tone softened now, not entirely without defensiveness, but closer to sincerity. The reason for her words, guilt or understanding, remained unclear, but at least she acknowledged it. Alicia didn't respond immediately. She turned to Tyrese once more. Ready? She inquired. He offered a small nod. Not yet. Kenneth appeared puzzled. Is there anything else we can do? Tyrese turned back towards the counter. Can I make the deposit again? A moment of quiet followed. Alicia smiled faintly. Kenneth quietly chuckled. It's already been processed, but we can review it again. Symbolically, Tyrese moved forward and retrieved the blue bank booklet. Kenneth accepted the booklet and retrieved a new deposit slip. Please complete this one, he said. Tyrese took the pen and wrote deliberately, ensuring a steady hand. He presented the slip, and Kenneth stamped it, acknowledging the action even though it held no practical effect. The focus transcended the numerical entries within the system. It represented a symbolic act of recovering what had been unjustly lost. Margaret observed quietly as Tyrese retrieved the slip, folded it into his booklet, and faced his mom again. All done, he announced. Let's go, Alicia responded. Yet, her gaze paused briefly. On Margaret, then Kenneth, then the young man her son was rapidly developing. But outside, as they entered the bright Arizona sunlight, an unspoken tension remained between them, something that required discussion before they departed. The parking lot was half full, a typical midday pause where heat waves rose from windshields and voices floated from open car windows. Inside the Monroe sedan, everything was still. Alicia closed the driver's side door carefully. Tyrese fastened his seatbelt, then looked out the window for a few silent moments. The building appeared different now, smaller, less imposing. But the feeling of tension in his chest hadn't completely disappeared. Want to talk about it? She asked gently. He didn't respond immediately. Why did she look at me that way? Alicia didn't hurry with her response. She reclined in her seat and inhaled, as if she's answered this question previously, but not in this manner. Because she formed an opinion about who you are before you spoke. That's unfair. No, she stated. It isn't. Tyrese glanced at the envelope once more. Still empty. Still neatly folded. I haven't done anything wrong. You haven't? She inquired. Sometimes the world reacts to perceptions rather than reality. Tyrese remained silent. Then, a question arose. Would she have requested all of that if I were a white kid? Alicia's jaw tightened subtly. It wasn't anger, but more like a pain she'd learned to carry so well that it didn't always surface. She responded no. Probably not. They contemplated that reality for a time. It was an uncomfortable feeling. It wasn't meant to be pleasant, but it was truthful. I felt lost for words at that moment. Tyrese spoke softly. I believe that expressing frustration would only exacerbate the situation. Alicia turned to him. You performed precisely as expected. You remained composed. You voiced your thoughts when prepared, and you presented the truth. Tyrese made eye contact with her. You did not appear displeased that I initially remained silent. She shook her head. No, I felt admiration for you. I still feel admiration for you. He nodded slowly. The tightness in his shoulders began to lessen slightly. Alicia adjusted her seatbelt and focused on the road ahead. This is the reason I encourage you. Why do I expect so much? Not because perfection is required, but because sometimes that's what people expect just for you to be equal. I hate that. I know, she responded. Me too. A beat passed. I wanted her to feel embarrassed, Tyrese said. I wanted her to feel small. I get that, she said. But the goal isn't to shrink people down. It's to open their eyes. Let them carry what they've done, so they can choose to do better next time. But what if they don't? Then that's on them, not on you. Tyrese rested his head against the seat. She didn't offer an apology until you arrived. Alicia observed her son, speaking softly. Occasionally, individuals only behave properly when they understand that the person they are disregarding possesses influence. It isn't correct. However, it occurs. She ought to have treated me with respect from the beginning. Agreed. They remained silent for a brief period. A vehicle parked 2 spaces down, and a woman emerged with a boy, approximately 5 or 6 years old, clutching a plastic coin bank. Alicia offered a small smile. Notice that? Another parent guiding their child in learning about money. Tyrese gazed out the window. I hope he isn't subjected to the experiences I faced. I hope someone like you is present when he arrives. That comment brought a smile to Tyrese's face for the first time that day. He looked at his mom. Do you believe I made a positive impact today? Alicia hesitated. I believe you accomplished something few people would do. You entered there with pride. You exited with your dignity. And along the way, you compelled people to confront their own reflections. He gazed back at the building. Next time I visit, I desire to go alone again. Alicia smiled. That's wise. As she inserted the key into the ignition, there remained one more lesson Tyrese needed to grasp. Something she'd withheld since the moment he entered that bank. The car emitted a quiet hum as Alicia turned the key, but she paused before driving away. Her hand rested on the gear shift, her fingers still for a moment. There's something I didn't tell you, she said, her eyes fixed forward. Tyrese looked over. About what? About that bank? About Margaret. He waited. I've been there before, she said a few months ago. I was opening a secondary business account, and she was the one who helped me. Tyrese blinked. Seriously? She wasn't rude, but she wasn't warm either. She recalled thinking she was distant, like she had somewhere more important to be. I dismissed it as a difficult day. He frowned. So, were you already aware of her behavior? Alicia nodded. I suspected something, but I didn't anticipate you experiencing the most significant impact. Tyrese glanced out the window again, his jaw clenched. Do you believe she acts this way toward other children? I'm unsure, Alicia responded. However, I recognize what prejudice appears as, masked by a smile or its absence. Tyrese settled back in his seat. He felt frustration, not anger, towards his mom, but rather a burden from the complexity that had enveloped something seemingly straightforward. I don't understand, he murmured. People frequently advise doing the right thing, saving money, being polite, and arriving punctually. Then this occurred. Alicia glanced at him. That's because doing the right thing doesn't always guarantee reciprocal treatment. However, it does mean you're developing something irreplaceable. What's that? Character and memory. The kind that remains with you, so when another child experiences it, you'll know precisely how to react. He paused briefly. Then, will this not be the last instance of this kind of event? Alicia slowly shook her head. Likely not. Tyrese breathed deeply through his nose. That's good, she smiled gently. But next time, the impact won't be the same. You'll be prepared, and perhaps the people around you will be more capable too, because you compelled them to confront something they wish to avoid. He examined the envelope, repeatedly opening and closing it as if it were origami. Then he stated, I still want to do it properly. The deposit? You already completed it, she responded, looking at the booklet in his lap. No, I mean return another day. Enter, complete the form, hand it to someone who shows me respect. Alicia's smile widened. You want to repeat the process. I want to conclude things correctly. He said it without pause. Alicia nodded slowly. We will do that when it's convenient for you. Tyrese straightened up. When I do, I won't question my decisions. I'll walk in as if I'm meant to be there, because you're meant to be, she said. You always have been. Don't allow a single moment to diminish you. He considered those words briefly. Afterward, he opened the glove box, placed the envelope inside, and secured it definitively. There's no reason to keep something that's meaningless. She lifted an eyebrow. Are you certain? Yes, I believe I've just made the most significant contribution already, she chuckled. A quiet feeling originating deep within his chest. You truly are your father's son, she remarked. Tyrese smiled. I say that when I'm being clever. You say it when I'm being wise. They departed the parking lot gradually, the bank receding behind them. As the car joined the main road, Tyrese looked down at the deposit booklet one last time before placing it into his backpack. The numbers were visible. However, the most significant aspect wasn't documented. He had acquired it without spending any money. However, before the day concluded, Tyrese had one final statement. It was a truth not found in formal education. They were midway back when Tyrese spoke again. His tone was even, yet his delivery prompted Alicia to look at him. You ever feel tired of having to prove something every time you walk in a room? She didn't respond immediately. The road stretched ahead, flat and unobstructed, the Arizona sun drawing distinct shadows across the dashboard. She understood the importance of thoughtful replies to questions like that. Constantly, she observed Tyrese focused on his hands. I didn't even do anything wrong, he stated. Yet it felt necessary to justify herself, even for a simple deposit. You did, she confirmed. And that's what makes you remarkable in a positive sense. You entered with honesty and departed with your dignity. You refused to allow them to diminish it. He remained silent for a period. Then, he expressed a desire to not feel anger constantly. You don't need to, she responded. Anger isn't the objective, it's a signal. What follows is what holds significance. Tyrese inclined his head, seemingly contemplating her words. So, how should I handle it? She asked. You must bear it constructively. Allow it to refine you, not to make you unyielding. He nodded, as if processing her advice. Alicia stopped at a gas station, needing to purchase a bottle of water before completing the drive. Stepping from the car, she lightly tossed her keys into Tyrese's lap. Lock the doors if you need to. I won't be long. She then entered the store. For the first time that day, Tyrese found himself alone. This time, he had only his thoughts. He glanced down at the keys, then looked back at the parking lot. It wasn't about the bank anymore. It was about the way people viewed him before he even had a chance to speak. About how his mom had faced challenges he hadn't known existed until today. He felt a sense of needing to stand with more confidence, to shoulder a greater burden, despite the unfairness of it. The car door made a sound as Alicia came back with a chilled bottle of water. She gave it to him silently, returned to the driver's seat, and fastened her seatbelt. Tyrese unscrewed the lid and drank. He said, placing the bottle down, I believe the most difficult aspect wasn't her asking all those questions. It was the expression on her face, as if I wasn't worthy of being present. Alicia nodded thoughtfully. That's the method they employ to make you vanish, she said. Not through words, but through uncertainty, through silence. With that expression, he continued, his voice gaining strength, but I didn't vanish. No, you didn't. She reached out and briefly squeezed his hand, adding, and you won't. Not now, not ever. The remainder of the drive was completed in near silence, but it was a silence that felt substantial, not devoid of meaning. As they arrived at the driveway, Tyrese moved forward and gazed at her. Alicia smiled, as she always did. I'm not just going to remember how they treated me, he stated. I'm going to remember how I responded. That's the lesson, she confirmed. That's what makes you unstoppable. Tyrese opened the door, took his backpack, and hesitated. I think next time, he said, I'll bring someone else with me, such as Jordan or Micah, and teach them how to manage it as well. Alicia's face brightened. That's what leaders do, she said. Tyrese offered a small, assured nod. So, I suppose I'm a leader now. He stepped out into the sun, and this time his footsteps didn't sound nervous or unsure. They sounded like someone who knew exactly where he was going. If this story resonated with you, even in a small way, please don't just scroll past. Share it, discuss it, because every child like Tyrese deserves to enter the world with confidence. And if you're still reading, please subscribe. There's more to come. Marlene Daniels paid for her first-class seat in full. However, when she was discreetly requested to move to the rear of the aircraft, she did not cause a disturbance. The remaining passengers did, and social media quickly followed suit. Marlene Daniels was not a woman who desired much. She had never been. This was true when she dedicated 32 years to Birmingham Public Schools and remained true when she raised 3 children on a teacher's salary following her husband's passing. She was reliable. She was resilient. At the age of 72, she had finally learned to do something she'd often advised others to do: take up space. This was the reason she purchased the ticket. Her granddaughter, Alia, was graduating from Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. Alia was the first in the family to earn a degree in environmental engineering. It was a significant occasion, and Marlene? She planned to attend, positioned prominently, dressed in her best Sunday clothes, and cheering as she once did at those high school basketball games. She had flown previously, certainly, but always in coach. Always quiet. Always practical. This time, however, she reserved a first-class seat. She paid in full. She selected her spot by the window. It wasn't about luxury. It was about presence. It was her way of stating, I'm still here. I'm present. Walking through the gate at Birmingham Shuttlesworth Airport, she appeared like someone who knew who she was. She wore gray slacks, a pearl gray sweater, small gold earrings, and a leather handbag that bore the marks of years of careful use. Her hair, silver and neatly arranged, was styled in a low twist. A smile touched her lips as she greeted the gate agent. A smile offered not from obligation, but from a genuine desire to be considerate, even when faced with unkindness. "Good morning, Miss Daniels," the agent said, scanning her ticket. She appreciated the formality. Miss Daniels. It still carried a certain dignity. As she entered the plane, several passengers in the front cabin briefly looked up. A few offered smiles. A man, appearing to be in his 40s, gave a courteous nod. Seated across the aisle, a younger woman wearing a denim jacket and chunky boots was reading a magazine. Marlene located her seat, 2A, and made herself comfortable. She carefully placed her bag beneath the seat in front of her, adjusted her sweater, and gazed out the window. The sky was clear. That felt like a positive omen. Flight attendants moved along the aisle, arranging luggage and engaging in brief conversations. One offered her a water bottle. "First time in first class?" she asked, her smile seeming practiced. Marlene quietly laughed. "Is it that noticeable?" She responded. "You look wonderful," the attendant continued. "Just wanted to say welcome." Marlene nodded graciously and redirected her gaze toward the window, her thoughts drifting to Alia's smile and the swift passage of time. It felt like only yesterday she had been in the front office of Jefferson Middle, observing her granddaughter twirling in her chair while completing paperwork. She relaxed, her hands resting calmly in her lap. Everything appeared tranquil, orderly, and correct. Then a voice broke the stillness. "Excuse me, ma'am," a flight attendant stated, differing from the initial attendant. The attendant was young, blonde, with an expression that was difficult to interpret. Marlene looked up. "I'm so sorry, but there appears to have been a seat assignment mix-up. Please move to seat 19C. Marlene blinked, seeming to question if she's understood correctly. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" she asked. "There's been a change. A late passenger arrived. The system assigned you to this seat in error. We require this seat to be free." Marlene remained perfectly still. Her voice remained even, and her eyes didn't show any displeasure. She reached into a bag, retrieved the paper boarding pass she always printed, and displayed it. "This is my assigned seat, 2A. It was paid for and chosen by me." The attendant looked at it, then checked the aisle. "I understand. I truly do, but we're aiming to resolve this swiftly before takeoff." The woman in the denim jacket, seated across the aisle, lowered her magazine. She observed her sitting there prior to anyone else boarding. She stated softly. Marlene remained still. "Not yet." Her fingers rested on the chair arms, applying just enough pressure to keep her steady. "I'm not attempting to cause disruption," she said calmly, "but I reserved this seat months ago." The attendant leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Ma'am, if you could please cooperate, we'll get this sorted. We just need you to move for now." Then, without another word, a man appeared. Tall, white, neatly trimmed beard, dressed in business casual, holding a laptop bag, and looking impatient. The attendant gave a small, practiced smile. Right this way, sir. But Marlene hadn't moved. Not yet. Marlene's fingers remained curled tight around the armrests. She detected the subtle sounds of passengers arranging themselves, zippers fastening, and safety belts securing. Yet the atmosphere surrounding her felt heavy, resistant to movement. The man now stood almost directly in front of her seat, looking down with an expression that was a blend of confusion and annoyance. "This is two-way, right?" he asked, looking towards the flight attendant, but not Marlene. "Yes, sir," she replied. "Just a minor misunderstanding. We are resolving it now." Marlene spoke with composure, but her voice conveyed firmness. "How is this addressed?" The attendant attempted to maintain a pleasant demeanor. "We simply require you to take seat 19C. It remains a satisfactory seat, and we will ensure you receive compensation for the disruption." Disruption? Marlene lifted her eyebrows. "Being asked to vacate the seat I paid for in front of a completely full plane after I had already been seated? That is not a small matter." The man finally made eye contact with her. He did not speak, just gazed. And something about that silence, easy for him, unsettling for her, felt significant. "Ma'am," the flight attendant repeated, her voice now more assertive. "Please." Marlene glanced around. Silence filled the cabin, but eyes were fixed on her. The man seated across the aisle appeared uneasy, fidgeting in his seat. The younger woman with the magazine continued to stare. She didn't desire to create a disturbance. It had never been her way. She had always instructed her students to overcome embarrassment with grace, not noise. At this point, she questioned what she would be conveying if she were to leave unnoticed. However, her dignity couldn't sustain the entire journey. Marlene carefully released her seatbelt, retrieved her bag, and rose. The flight attendant sighed, clearly relieved. "Thank you," she stated, and moved to allow the man to take the seat, where he opened his laptop and straightened his tie as if it were a routine occurrence. Marlene held her back straight as she walked along the narrow aisle, passing rows of strangers who didn't meet her gaze. She arrived at row 19, located seat C, and put her bag under the seat without a word. The chair was smaller, situated nearer the restroom, noisy, confined, and not at all what she had anticipated. She settled in quietly, feeling a stinging in her eyes. A man seated across the row, a teenager wearing headphones, looked at her with a questioning expression. She gave him a weary smile. A weight settled in her chest, not from the seat itself, but from the lack of surprise. She had hoped, perhaps naively, that circumstances had changed. That at her age, following her considerable contributions to others, she wouldn't need to demonstrate her right to what she had purchased. She glanced down at her hands, noticing a slight tremor. Her wedding band remained on her finger, even after so many years. She had raised 3 children, 2 of whom were now professionals. She had dedicated her life to her students, writing letters to parents, staying late to tutor. She had broken up fights, buried students lost too soon, taught kids how to believe in themselves even when the world didn't. But here, on this plane, she was just someone to be moved out of the way. The captain came over the speaker, giving the usual welcome. "Flight time to Indianapolis, 1 hour and 42 minutes. Seat backs upright, tray tables locked." Marlene leaned her head against the window. She remained silent, her gaze fixed. Then, a subtle change occurred. "Excuse me?" The voice came from the woman wearing a denim jacket, who had now risen to her feet. "Hello," she said, her tone clear enough for Rose to hear. "What transpired here doesn't feel right." Marlene turned, visibly surprised. The woman continued, gesturing towards the front. "That lady had her seat initially. I observed her checking in and taking her assigned seat. She presented a printed boarding pass. And you all moved her? What was the reason for that?" A moment of silence followed. Several passengers glanced upward, seemingly attentive. A flight attendant hurried over, attempting to soothe the woman. "I understand your concern, but we're trying to keep things moving," she said. "No," the woman responded, her voice rising. "You moved her because you believed she wouldn't speak out. But I will," and she wasn't alone anymore. The cabin, which had just moments before been filled with the quiet rustle of carry-ons and pre-flight conversation, was now utterly silent. Marlene remained still. She remained in 19C, uncertain whether to feel embarrassed or thankful. Perhaps both. She observed the woman, appearing to be in her mid-30s, with a confident posture and eyes filled with frustration, firmly holding her position. "I'm sorry," the woman continued, now speaking to everyone nearby. "But you can't ignore what just occurred. You moved that woman from her purchased seat, offering no reason. And this man," she indicated towards two, simply walked in as if everything was normal. The gentleman in the seat glanced up briefly, adjusting his cufflinks. He remained silent. "Why?" the woman insisted. "And I want the rest of the plane to hear, because this isn't correct." The flight attendant paused. She began to speak, but then glanced around. Passengers were turning to look. Phones appeared. A red-haired teenager 2 rows back had his camera aimed directly forward, recording openly. A mother with a toddler leaned in and whispered to her husband. People's gazes were moving. Tension increased. Suddenly, a voice from row 3 interrupted. "She is correct." A man, appearing to be in his late 40s, with a beard streaked with gray and wearing a worn Detroit Tigers cap, rose partially from his seat. I observed it as well. She was already present, holding a boarding pass. "You moved her without justification, and honestly, I am not satisfied with that." The flight crew exchanged looks. Another attendant, taller, older, possibly more experienced, approached, placing a hand lightly on the younger woman's arm. "We will be able to discuss this once we are airborne," he stated. The woman in denim remained still. "No, you speak now. This was not an accident. This was a deliberate action. And if no one else is going to voice it, I will." That woman was repositioned because you believed she wouldn't object due to her age. And let's be frank, because she is black. That word resonated like a sharp rebuke in the quiet. Marlene averted her eyes. She felt a flush rise up her neck. She had never enjoyed being the focus of attention. A voice arose from the rear of the cabin. "That's unfair," a younger man murmured. "There's no way that should have occurred." Another person then spoke, their voice raised. "Return her seat." The man wearing a two-way radio seemed uneasy and finally closed his laptop. He glanced at the flight crew. "Honestly, I don't need the seat if it's going to cause a disturbance," he stated. "I simply took the one they assigned to me." The assertive woman responded with a derisive laugh. "You observed her relocation and didn't inquire, not even once." He shrugged, deliberately avoiding eye contact. "It's not my responsibility." The flight attendant tried to manage the situation. "We recognize emotions are intense. Let's resolve this promptly so we can depart on time." However, the man wearing the Tiger's cap interrupted. "Not until she receives her seat back." He turned and addressed Marlene. "Ma'am," he said, "would you like your seat back?" She paused. She had dedicated much of her life to instructing others on how to utilize their voice to champion what is just. Now her own trembled. "I don't want to be the cause of this flight being delayed," she stated quietly. "You are not," the woman from row 2 responded. "You are the reason it might finally be rectified." That was when it occurred. The man in row 4 rose, followed by a couple situated behind him. "If she doesn't receive her seat," someone declared, "we are not sitting either." Flight attendants began to panic. Someone reached for the phone to contact the pilot. The aircraft doors remained open, and established procedures were now being implemented. The chief flight attendant returned, visibly agitated. "We need to halt boarding," a fellow passenger interjected. "It's too late. The planes are full. Resolve this immediately." Marlene rose deliberately. Her hands were steady now. "I didn't request this situation," she stated. "However, I will not remain here and pretend I didn't receive what I paid for. I secured seat 2A. I checked in promptly. I adhered to every guideline. Throughout my life, I've adhered to every guideline." Then, suddenly, the man in 2A rose. He offered no apology. He avoided eye contact. He simply took his laptop and proceeded toward the rear of the plane. The crew swiftly assisted Marlene in returning to the front. As she passed, numerous passengers acknowledged her with nods. Several offered words of encouragement. "Good for you. You didn't deserve that." We saw. She resumed her seat in 2A. The armrests felt altered this time. Not stiff, not cold. By the time the plane departed, The video had already been uploaded online. As the aircraft ascended through the clouds, the mood within the cabin remained subdued. Marlene was seated in 2A, her hands calmly resting in her lap. She had not consumed the offered beverage. It wasn't necessary. Her mind was occupied. She felt no anger, not a vocal expression of it. She was considering her granddaughter, reflecting on the world Alia was entering with that degree. This incident, this small public humiliation, wasn't unprecedented. However, something about it felt different this time. In row 18, a teenager with red hair had already posted a 23-second video to TikTok with a caption, "They move an old black woman out of her first-class seat for some dude." The entire plane seemed to agree. The reactions were immediate. "That's disgusting. She deserves to have that seat back. What's the airline? Tag them." By the time the flight landed in Indiana, 3 influencers had compiled a video that was distributed by an account called Justice from the Aisle, and it had already surpassed 80,000 views. Marlene was unaware of any of this. She was still arranging her sweater and getting ready to text Alia upon arriving at the terminal. Her phone had remained turned off throughout the flight. As passengers exited the aircraft, several briefly touched her arm. "You're a class act," they said. "Glad they made it right." She softly expressed her gratitude, her eyes appearing warm yet weary. She felt unsure how to react to the focus. A portion of her longed to retreat into the airport bustle, simply taking her shuttle and heading into town. However, upon activating her phone, it vibrated and vibrated again. Numerous messages arrived, some from her children, others from past colleagues, and even a few unfamiliar numbers. Her youngest son, Louis, had attempted to call her 3 times. She accepted the call on the 4th ring. "Mama," he said, his voice already filled with emotion. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby." "Why? You're all over the internet. I mean everywhere, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Someone has a video of you standing up for yourself. You handled that with grace, Mama. I'm proud of you." Marlene's chest tightened. I didn't even know she was filming. She captured everything. They attempted to displace you from a seat you paid for, and people are reacting strongly. She paused, taking a deep breath. "I didn't do anything extraordinary." "Yes, you did," Louis stated. By the time she reached the parking area where her shuttle was waiting, she had missed 5 additional calls. One was from a local reporter in Indiana. 2 were from media outlets she didn't recognize. Someone named Mia from the Morning Circle had emailed her twice already. Marlene lowered her phone into her lap, allowing the shuttle to rock slightly as it pulled away from the curb. A college-aged black woman with thick braids and a Purdue hoodie sat beside her. She looked at Marlene, paused briefly, then shifted in her seat. "Excuse me, ma'am," she began hesitantly. "Were you the woman on the plane today? The one in the video?" Marlene raised her eyebrows. "That fast?" The girl smiled. "People share things that are important, and this was important." Marlene paused. "It's odd. I didn't intend to be involved in something like this." The girl spoke softly, saying it hadn't been planned. However, she acknowledged that Marlene had managed the situation in a manner that resonated with many. Marlene returned a smile, then glanced out the window, observing the passing billboards and highway signs. She had simply intended to attend a graduation, and now the entire country was discussing the event. However, the airline remained silent, an unsettling silence. By the time Marlene arrived at her hotel in Lafayette, her name was already appearing in the subject lines of press releases. Unofficially, naturally, no company was willing to acknowledge anything that could incur a financial cost. However, the airline, Coastal Air, was aware of the situation. They had viewed the videos, read the online discussions, and hastily convened in private meetings. Marlene's phone rang again as she entered the elevator. An unfamiliar number. She allowed it to proceed to voicemail. She felt weary. She had traveled across 2 states, experienced humiliation, then received applause, and subsequently been drawn into a situation she hadn't requested. All she wanted now was a warm shower, a meal she didn't have to cook, and to see Ollie across that stage. Her room overlooked a small park where families walked dogs and students tossed frisbees. The sun was dipping behind the trees. Marlene watched for a moment before sitting down and turning on the TV, Local news was already on. The video, now exceeding 2.3 million views in under 12 hours, depicts what seems to be an elderly black woman being requested to relocate from her designated seat in the first-class cabin to make room for a younger white passenger. Other passengers on board stepped in, and the woman was ultimately returned to her original seat. She silenced the notification. Her phone vibrated again, a text from Lewis. Coastal Air has released a statement. It's underwhelming. She clicked the link. The official statement read, "We are aware of the incident on board Flight 482 today involving a seat assignment confusion. Coastal Air is committed to fair and inclusive treatment for all passengers and is reviewing internal procedures. We apologize for any inconvenience experienced." Inconvenience, she whispered, shaking her head. That word again. She remembered all the time she'd written real apologies in her career, when a teacher lost their temper, when a parent was left unheard. She avoided using that term, especially after incidents occurred. That evening, she accepted a phone call. Marlene Daniels? The voice was distinct and resolute. It belonged to a woman, professional in tone. Yes, speaking. This was Nina Morgan. I'm a producer with Midday Matters. We're interested in having you on our show tomorrow morning, just to briefly discuss your experience. It won't be intrusive. You're seen as representing something larger, and people are paying attention. Marlene hesitated. I'm not a symbol, she replied. I know, Nina responded, her voice gentle and sincere. That's why her refusal of the interview felt significant, at least for the time being. A quiet impulse arose within her. She had dedicated her life to assisting others in expressing themselves. Perhaps now was her opportunity to speak out once more. The following morning, she composed a handwritten note. It was brief, a single page in length, but each word was carefully chosen. She began with the sentence, I wasn't trying to go viral. I attempted to see my granddaughter. She spoke about dignity, about how simple it is to overlook older individuals, about what it feels like to be marginalized, not for the first time, but for the thousandth. And she concluded with this. I spent decades telling young people they were important, that their presence was important, that they belonged. I still believe that. But sometimes the ones who forget are not the students. It's the people who think they're in charge. She entrusted the letter to Lewis, who shared it on his social media with her consent. Within hours, by lunchtime, it had accumulated over 400,000 shares. Her story appeared on talk shows. An op-ed piece in the Indianapolis Journal commended her composure. Civil rights advocates incorporated her letter into speeches and public events. A particular comment resonated with her. It originated from a woman named Danielle in Topeka. My mother experienced a time when she was pushed out of a bank queue and dismissed it with a laugh. She stated, people like us don't make noise. I wish she could have witnessed this. Ms. Daniels, thank you. Your words helped me remember not to dismiss things so easily. Marlene was seated near the window, holding her phone and a letter. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't protested. She hadn't created a video. She simply stated the facts. However, the crucial moment she awaited hadn't arrived. It was pending on a campus stage. Saturday morning dawned clear and cool. Marlene hadn't slept well. Amidst the news reports, the communications, and the sensation of being observed by countless unseen individuals, finding peace had been challenging. Yet, her steps were firm as she entered the campus of Purdue University, her focus resolute. She wore a navy blue dress and a coordinating hat, the very one she'd reserved for a significant occasion. This was that occasion. She was unconcerned if people recognized her now. Let them. Today was not about her. She was there to witness her granddaughter's walk. The stadium seating was almost completely full when she located her row. A security guard approached her, held her gaze for a moment, then smiled. Ms. Daniels, yes? He said, I just wanted to say thank you. I saw the video. I'm glad you stood your ground. She nodded warmly. Appreciate that. I'm here for my granddaughter. He reached into his pocket and continued. The dean of students asked me to escort you to a reserved section. For family. It has a better view. Marlene paused, questioning, reserved for whom? He smiled. For you. She followed him upwards to the front rows, just behind the stage, where a simple seat was designated with a folded card. Mrs. Marlene Daniels, guest of honor. She blinked, her heart skipping a beat. It wasn't a spotlight. There was no podium, just a seat, and it belonged to her. Offered, not taken. Shortly, the ceremony commenced. Names were announced. Gowns flowed. Applause resounded. Then, Alia Denise Daniels. The name resonated through the air like a church bell. Marlene watched as her granddaughter advanced. Tall, radiant, her eyes gleaming under the weight of her own accomplishment. She saw her grandmother, and for a split second that proud smile wavered, only to return, fuller, brighter, and glistening with tears. Following the ceremony, the family assembled beneath a cluster of trees near the quad. Her sons were already debating who was taking whom to dinner. Her daughter-in-law was adjusting her youngest shirt. Alia hurried to her and embraced her grandmother's waist, almost dislodging the hat. "You made it," she murmured. "Naturally I did," Marlene responded. "Do you imagine a seating error would prevent me?" They laughed, lingering in the embrace. Alia retreated, her eyes glistening. "I witnessed everything, Grandma. The videos, the letter. I'm receiving messages from students at school, professors, classmates, individuals I don't even know. You've instigated conversations." "I didn't attempt to," Marlene stated. "I simply didn't want to remain silent anymore." Alia concurred. "Perhaps we don't always have to raise our voices. But when we do speak, people should pay attention." Later that afternoon, while gathering her belongings back at the hotel, Marlene received a formal letter slid under her door. It bore the Coastal Air logo in an embossed design. The letter contained an offer, an invitation to speak at their annual Equity and Training Summit, with all expenses covered. They described it as an opportunity to elevate the discussion. She read the letter twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in her purse. The next day, she called the number provided. "Ms. Daniels, we're honored you returned our call," said a representative. "We'd love for you to be our guest speaker. Your story, your grace, has moved thousands." "I'm flattered," Marlene said plainly, "but I won't be attending." The woman on the other end paused. "May I ask why?" Marlene responded, "I wasn't moved to speak for your company. I spoke because my dignity fell out of place in row 19. She concluded the call softly and settled onto the bed's edge, observing a small group of children playing in the park across the street. The wind swirled leaves in lazy circles. She didn't require a public forum. She had already conveyed her message, and it was apparent without explicit statement. This time, the seat wasn't withheld from her. It was presented. She simply declined to occupy it. However, there was one final matter she needed to address. The information wasn't shared with the airline, nor with reporters. It was for all of us. The morning she flew back home, Marlene sat quietly by the airport window, observing the activity on the tarmac. Luggage carts, fuel trucks, a slow taxiing plane with its belly full of untold stories. She sipped coffee from paper cup, her hands now steady. The commotion had subsided. News cycles had moved on. Trending topics had displaced her face with fresh headlines. And that was acceptable. Marlene's actions weren't motivated by a desire for attention. They stemmed from an internal resistance to diminishing. Her phone vibrated again. It was another message from an unknown sender, a retired nurse in Arizona. The message read, "I've spent my whole life apologizing before I even spoke. Thank you for reminding me I don't have to." Marlene reread the message, then put her phone away and surveyed the terminal. People passed by her, pulling carry-on bags, enjoying lattes, and holding onto their children's hands. Most didn't recognize her. She wore her usual gray sweater and pearl earrings, nothing extravagant. Yet, if one observed carefully, there was a certain quality to her demeanor, a quiet strength that surpassed mere physical bearing. She recalled the many years she had dedicated to assuring her students they mattered, instilling in young black girls the importance of carrying themselves with confidence, articulating their thoughts with precision, and refusing to allow others to diminish their worth. She believed she had concluded imparting this guidance upon her retirement. She was mistaken. Self-respect is inherent. It isn't acquired through achievement or dependent on positions, designations, or connections. It isn't bestowed by unfamiliar individuals, and it cannot be compromised when circumstances deem it problematic for another. It is rightfully yours, regardless of whether others acknowledge it. That was the core principle. It resonated not only with those who observed her movement down the plain aisle, but with the reserved individuals. Those who suppressed their dignity countless times in checkout lines, boardrooms, waiting rooms. Those who've been subtly indicated to relinquish their seat, either physically or figuratively, to someone deemed more significant. Marlene's story wasn't concerning revenge. It wasn't reflecting anger. It wasn't even focused on that man or that airline. The memory centered on the decision she made, resolving that she wouldn't remain silent for anyone. Just before her flight was scheduled to board, she rose and stretched. A young girl close by gently pulled on her mother's sleeve and murmured, "That's the lady from the video." Marlene offered a slight smile. It wasn't a broad smile, nor one seeking acknowledgement. It was the type of smile that conveyed, "I am aware of my identity." As she proceeded toward the gate, the same flight attendant from her initial journey appeared, though in a different uniform on a different day. The woman looked up, a flash of recognition in her eyes. She offered a brief nod. Marlene stated simply, "Good morning." Nothing more, nothing less. A lengthy explanation wasn't necessary. Applause wasn't required. She possessed something more valuable: serenity. As the gate opened and boarding commenced, Marlene didn't hurry. She waited patiently. She proceeded deliberately, and, upon reaching her row, yes, first class once more, she positioned her bag under the seat, took a seat, and gazed out the window. The sky stretched endlessly. She remained silent for the entire flight because she felt no need to speak. Occasionally, the most impactful declaration is simply holding your place, particularly when others anticipate you to relinquish it. Therefore, if you're hearing this and you've ever felt diminished for asserting yourself, recall Marlene Daniels. Not because she became widely known online, but because she never increased her volume, and yet everyone understood her. If this narrative resonated with you, please share it. Speak when you are able. Remain in your seat when required. And most importantly, never allow another person to determine when your dignity is present. Laughter followed the reserved girl, until a video appeared showing her protecting herself with remarkable composure, shifting the opinions of both Roosevelt High and the online community against her tormentor. If you inquired among the students at Roosevelt High about who held sway in the corridors, the response would invariably be one name: Brielle Wentworth. 17 years old, known for her quick wit and consistently ahead of the latest trends, Brielle was more than a senior. She was the senior. Brielle's father was a prominent corporate attorney in Sacramento, while her mother managed a luxury staging company for real estate. Their home in El Dorado Hills had been featured in a spread showcasing modern home design. She drove a graphite Range Rover, sported limited edition sneakers that were yet to be released, and possessed a TikTok following exceeding that of many local influencers. To those outside, Brielle appeared to have everything, and she was content with that perception. Each morning presented an opportunity for a performance. She entered school with a graceful, almost effortless stride. Impeccable hair, perfect lashes, AirPods in, iced coffee in hand. Girls aspired to be her. Boys observed her every move. Teachers expressed frustration, but even they acknowledged her intelligence. Just intelligent enough to avoid failing, never quite striving hard enough to fully challenge herself. That fall, senior year was progressing exactly as she'd envisioned. Prom committee, brand collaborations, homecoming queen virtually assured. No one jeopardized her position until Ayanna Brooks walked in. She arrived without fanfare, no elaborate smile, no designer handbag, just a simple canvas backpack, her braided hair neatly pulled back, and a subtle acknowledgement to the teacher. She had transferred from a charter school in Vallejo. A full scholarship based on academic merit was the extent of what anyone initially knew. She took a seat 2 rows in front of Brielle in AP Literature, and within the first week, murmurs began regarding her already achieving the highest grade in the class. Within 2 weeks, Mr. Daniels read aloud one of Ayana's essays, not only to check for grammar, but because it genuinely affected him. Brielle disapproved of this. She didn't voice it, but a slight movement of her lip betrayed her feelings. The way her eyes focused intently when Ayana responded to questions without notes, and the subtle sound she made when Mr. Daniels asked her to expand on what Ayana had just said, all revealed her discomfort. Brielle had witnessed many new girls arrive and depart. Attractive girls, intelligent girls, unusual girls, but Ayana was unlike any she's seen before. She made no effort to compete. She didn't flirt with teachers or seek attention, and that, in turn, made her stand out. In the cafeteria, Ayana sat alone, not in a way that suggested sadness, but more as if she preferred it. She read during lunch, sometimes with earbuds in, sometimes not, consistently calm and unreadable. Brielle found it difficult to tolerate her composure. "She's acting like she's better than everyone," Brielle muttered to her friend Mackenzie one afternoon. Near the gym's vending machines, they stood. Mackenzie chewed her gum and gave a slight lift of her shoulders. She appeared reserved, perhaps even timid, Brielle observed. "No," Brielle stated directly. "She's strategic. One doesn't adopt an aura of innocence and grace unless it's intentional, meant to attract attention." This wasn't envy, Brielle reassured herself. It was about maintaining control. If others began to admire Ayana's intelligence and composed demeanor, what would that signify for her? And what of the carefully constructed persona she had cultivated? It began subtly, with hushed comments near Ayana's locker. Remarks like, "Oh wow, did you bring your thesis today?" Manufactured gasps occurred during roll call when Ayana's name was called in multiple AP classes. There were also sarcastic comments about her library clothes and her perceived religious demeanor. Ayana remained unfazed. She consistently attended, excelled on every quiz, and navigated the halls as if the behavior didn't affect her. Even when Brielle made eye contact and smirked, she received no response. However, this only escalated the situation. Brielle craved a reaction. She desired control. What she couldn't control worried her. However, a change was imminent, and not the kind Brielle anticipated. It began with Brielle posing a question just loud enough to be heard. Does she even talk? Or does she just blink Morse code? This occurred during AP statistics. Several students laughed quietly. Ayana looked to the side, but continued her work. Mr. Fielding remained silent, but hesitated noticeably before resuming the lesson. Brielle smiled, and the others followed suit. She had established the atmosphere. Things became less difficult after that. It was almost natural. A contrived cough whenever Ayana entered class. Disdainful eye rolls when she raised her hand. Brielle even began imitating the way Ayana sat. Back straight, legs crossed, hands folded in an exaggerated and cartoonish way. Just enough for her friends to erupt in laughter. Ayana made no reply, but she was aware. Naturally, she was aware. During one afternoon in the library, Ayana was seated by the window, working on calculus problems. A junior, Sean, pulled a chair over to her and sat down without permission. "You don't talk much, huh?" he said. She looked up. "I talk, just not when I don't need to." "You think you're better than everyone? Or are you just antisocial?" She replied, "I think I'm trying to study." He scoffed, stood up, and walked away. Two girls near the printer chuckled. One of them murmured, "Attitude on silent mode." Ayana didn't react visibly, though her pencil paused. Later that evening at home, her mother observed that she was uncharacteristically subdued. "You all right, sweetie?" she inquired, serving rice. Ayana offered a slight movement of her shoulders. "The usual?" Her mom regarded her with a knowing glance, the kind reserved for moments when a child is troubled but not ready to share. Meanwhile, in El Dorado Hills, Brielle was eating dinner with her mom, checking TikTok while pushing around salmon she hadn't requested. "I heard the new girl aced the chem test," her mom said, not looking up from her phone. "Cool," Brielle replied. "Maybe she could tutor you." Brielle looked up slowly. "What?" "You know, if you want to bring your grade up before early decision apps are due." "She's not even applying to the same schools as me." "How do you know?" "I just know." Her mom didn't push further, but Brielle's jaw stayed clenched the rest of the meal. Back at school, the teasing moved into group chats. A meme depicting Ayana studying by herself during lunch circulated online, accompanied by the caption, plotting her next essay to destroy us all. It spread through private stories, appeared repeatedly in comment sections, and evolved into a shared joke. Publicly, no one defended her. However, Ethan Mercado, a reserve student from AV Club, approached her at her locker one afternoon. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked. She looked up, visibly surprised. "Yeah, why?" She replied. "I've seen what's being said," he stated, "and I don't participate in the laughter." She nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said. He paused. "Have you ever won a company during lunch? Or something similar?" She didn't confirm, but she didn't decline either. Regardless, the stares continued. The whispers persisted, and Brielle kept observing, always from a distance, attempting to understand why Ayana wasn't faltering. Then, one day in lit class, Mr. Daniels made an error. He returned essays. Ayana's received a 99. Brielle's received a 72. He didn't comment verbally, simply distributing the papers as normal. However, Brielle noticed the grades and became upset. "Did you even read mine?" she asked, her voice sharp. The room fell silent. Mr. Daniels blinked. "Excuse me? You gave her a 99, and mine barely passes." Brielle responded, "If you have a question about your grade, we can discuss it after class," she said dismissively. "Whatever," he muttered. She kept her eyes on the desk, her pen tapping lightly. After class, Ethan approached Ayana again. "She's scared of you, you know." Ayana shook her head. "She just doesn't understand me. She doesn't want to." This was a critical moment. Brielle felt a surge of fear, knowing she was on the verge of an action that would dramatically alter circumstances. This time, the entire student body of Meadowbrook High would witness it. Thursday afternoon felt interminable, heavy with humidity. The air conditioning in the school cafeteria had been unreliable throughout the week, contributing to an already strained atmosphere. Brielle, feeling listless and agitated, rested her chin on her hand, gazing across the room at Ayana from her tray of uneaten chicken nuggets. Ayana was in her usual spot, near the far windows, eating quietly with a paperback, Things Fall Apart, beside her tray. Brielle scowled. "Naturally, she's reading something with a title like that," she murmured. Mackenzie looked up, questioning. "You're still focused on this. She seems to think she's special." "Exactly," Brielle retorted. "And people are treating that like it's a positive thing." Mackenzie paused. "So, are you suggesting you want to throw food at her?" "No," Brielle stated. She wanted to allow her a brief pause. It was then that the concept began to develop. She involved Zach and Nina, two juniors eager to gain her favor. They possessed access to the AV Club's green screen equipment and a copy of the morning announcements video. Within less than a day, they created a fabricated segment. Ayana's face was superimposed onto an old news anchor's body, accompanied by robotic audio. The title read, "Ayana Brooks proclaims herself queen of Roosevelt High." It was foolish, yet well executed. It appeared remarkably authentic. The strategy? To broadcast it during morning announcements just before the start of second period. And it succeeded. Initially, that Friday morning, immediately following the Pledge of Allegiance, the video began playing. For a moment, many students paused, visibly confused. Then laughter erupted. It was loud, unpleasant, and reverberated through the hallways. Ayana was in third period English when she heard about it. A sophomore rushed into the classroom, holding a phone, and showed her the video. "Yo, Ayana, did you see this?" he said, still laughing. She didn't respond. She simply looked at the screen, her own face appearing warped, her voice sounding mechanical and derisive. She blinked once, then closed her eyes firmly, as if attempting to erase everything. Afterward that day, Brielle encountered her in the hall. "Hey," she said gently, "I enjoyed your short presentation this morning." Ayana halted her movement, turned deliberately. Their eyes connected, truly connected for the first time. And for a brief instant, Brielle sensed something. Not regret, but a trace of doubt. As if she wasn't certain anymore who held the advantage. That night, Ayana sat at the kitchen table, her laptop closed, tea growing cold beside her. Her mom sat across from her. They're messing with you again? Ayana nodded. You want me to call someone? No, it'll make it worse. Her mom leaned forward. Baby, what they're doing isn't just teasing anymore. It's harassment. Ayana's jaw clenched. They're waiting for me to snap. I'm not giving them that. Her mom studied her face. You sure? Ayana's voice was low. I'm sure. Her hands trembled beneath the table. The following morning, she arrived at school wearing black leggings and a plain hoodie. She carried nothing but her phone, no books, no backpack. She proceeded directly past the main office, bypassing her locker, and headed straight to the gym. There, she sat silently on the bleachers as the warm-ups began. The girls' volleyball team observed her. Coach Ramirez noticed her and came over. Ayana, is everything all right? He asked. I just need to use the gym after school. Is that a problem? He appeared puzzled but nodded. There were only 15 minutes between practice and basketball. That was all the time she had. She thanked him, and she waited. After school, Ayana returned. Coach had left the mats out. She took one to the center of the floor and placed her bag next to it. For the subsequent 15 minutes, she moved. Fluidly, sharply, powerfully. Snap kicks, elbow strikes, pivot turns. Breathe. Reset. Again. There wasn't any music. There was no audience. Just motion. Just discipline. She was unaware that someone had entered. She was completely unaware that he had recorded it. It was Ethan. He remained silent, simply observing. His hand trembled almost imperceptibly as he pressed record. Later that night, he posted a 19-second clip with the caption, "They picked the wrong one." No tags, no names, just movement, precision, focus. The video quickly gained attention, and once it spread, nothing at Roosevelt would ever be the same. By Monday morning, the clip had reached over 200,000 views. No names, no faces. A young woman in a hoodie moved with the precision of an action film star. Her movements were seamless, accurate, and completely controlled. The video gained widespread attention on TikTok, sparking numerous reactions. Users created stitched videos attempting to replicate her kicks, and the comment section was filled with speculation. Who was she? She executed every movement flawlessly. It was evident she had received training, though at Roosevelt High, the truth wasn't widely known. Not yet. In first period, Brielle was seated with her feet resting on the desk, using her phone. She watched the video, paused, and tilted her head. She looks familiar, she muttered. By lunch, someone had made the connection. Ayana's name began circulating through the halls again. But this time, the tone was different. Less ridicule, more inquisitiveness, and something else Brielle hadn't experienced before. Respect. She's the one from the video. I thought she was just a nerd. Yo, she's genuine. Brielle sensed it. The change. Not a complete takeover, but its initial stage. She began to notice hushed conversations that excluded her. Praise that wasn't directed at her. The shifts were minor, yet they caused her distress. That afternoon, she confronted Ayana near the science wing. Ayana was walking alone, wearing earbuds and a hoodie. She paused when Brielle blocked her path, arms crossed. You think you're clever, huh? Brielle said. Ayana removed one earbud. What? Are you trying to go viral now? Playing the humble angle? Ayana blinked deliberately. I didn't post that video. Brielle let out a scoff. It seemed like a coincidence that this appeared just as people started calling her strange. Ayana remained still, composed. You know what your problem is? Brielle moved closer. You carry yourself as if you're above speaking to anyone, and then you act surprised when people don't care for you. I don't act surprised, Ayana replied quietly. Brielle's cheeks reddened. She glanced around. Several students nearby had paused, observing, watching, waiting. I'm warning you, Brielle hissed. Ayana turned to leave. Then Brielle pushed her. The push wasn't forceful, but it was calculated, public enough to draw attention, and loud enough to elicit gasps. Ayana faltered slightly, regained her balance, and turned to face Brielle. They held each other's gaze for a drawn-out moment. Subsequently, Ayana reacted. She avoided striking Brielle Instead, she intercepted the subsequent push with such speed that Brielle's wrist rotated, throwing her off balance. Ayanna then moved to her side and resumed her position. The entire exchange concluded in fewer than 3 seconds. The incident was recorded on a phone. It captured the precise moment Ayanna's foot landed, the subtle movement of Brielle's arms, Ayanna's stillness, her unwillingness to retaliate. This new video surpassed the initial one, spreading rapidly. By that evening, news organizations had begun contacting Roosevelt High. Some described it as a display of controlled self-defense. Others characterized it as the moment the reserved girl silenced everything. Ayanna remained silent, making no social media posts or tweets. She remained silent regarding the online discussions. She simply attended school Tuesday morning, holding her head high and with her hoodie unzipped. Surprisingly, there was no laughter, neither in the hallways, nor in the cafeteria, and not even within the group chats. Brielle, however, struggled to reach third period before others began to avoid her. This wasn't due to fear, but rather embarrassment. The question lingered. Why would she push her? What prompted her to touch her? Everyone saw the video. Ayanna hadn't even thrown a punch. Brielle attempted to explain. She tried to make light of the situation. No one paid attention. And for the first time in her life, Brielle Wentworth felt truly observed. Not in the manner she had constructed her existence. However, the significant consequences were yet to unfold. They wouldn't start until individuals began taking sides. By midweek, Ayanna Brooks was a name recognized beyond Sacramento. A local channel broadcasted the video, presenting a brief report. Student defends herself with poise after being confronted at school. The martial arts studio in Vallejo shared a clip of her, commending her technique and poise. A Reddit user discovered earlier footage of her competing in a junior nationals tournament when she was 10 years old. She had secured gold. Consequently, Ayanna transitioned from being a reserve scholarship student to a subject of public attention. At Roosevelt High, a palpable change occurred. Teachers discussed her in break rooms, and guidance counselors conducted private meetings. Several parents emailed the school, inquiring about plans to handle bullying following recent occurrences. Brielle was experiencing a significant amount of it. She attempted to appear unaffected, arriving at school wearing sunglasses and large hoodies, feigning a lack of distress. However, the pain persisted. Each time someone ignored her, each time Ayanna's name was mentioned without including hers, she felt deeply hurt and recalled Mr. Daniels' words. Courage sometimes is saying nothing at all. Demonstrating his actions through silence, he looked towards Ayanna, who remained unengaged. Brielle felt a constriction in her chest. During lunch, she joined Mackenzie and Zach, but the table felt desolate. Discussions became uncomfortable. People avoided mentioning the unspoken, that perhaps Brielle had overreacted, that perhaps Ayanna was not at fault. Compounding the situation, her supporters began to criticize her. The remarks on her most recent post were harsh. Didn't you push her? Why are you upset that she's talented? You've contributed to why people distrust popular girls. Brielle deactivated her comments, then her DMs, then her account. At home, she forcefully closed her laptop and tossed her phone across the room. Her mother gently knocked, opened the door slightly. Would you like to talk? No. You've been unusually silent recently. I'm Euphina. You're not. I said I'm fine. Silence. Then her mom's voice, soft. You know, sometimes when it feels as though everything is falling apart, it's simply the truth revealing itself. The door closed again. Returning to school, Ayanna remained unchanged. She carried herself without needing to demonstrate anything. Her clothing was the same. She showed no signs of boasting. She didn't mention the events that transpired. She simply proceeded through the day as before. That silence, which Brielle had previously disliked, was now the quality people admired the most. She was no longer simply the girl who kicked. She was something more, something Brielle had never taken the time to comprehend. Even Ethan observed this. He located her close to the lockers on Thursday afternoon, immediately following class. You okay? He inquired. Ayanna offered a weary smile, acknowledging his presence. You know people are supporting you, right? He continued. I'm not attempting to create factions. Ayana responded, I understand. But you unintentionally did, he stated, simply by remaining still. She hesitated. I didn't desire any of this. He replied, I know. Nearby, Brielle observed their conversation. For the initial time, she wasn't experiencing anger. Instead, she felt bewildered by the recognition Ayana was receiving. It wasn't popularity, it was genuine respect. It lacked fanfare and wasn't staged. It required no enhancements or labels. It simply existed. Brielle sat in her car after school, observing her reflection in the rearview mirror. Not the mascara or the precise eyeliner, not the carefully constructed image she typically presented. Just a girl uncertain of her identity without the attention. But even she couldn't escape the upcoming moment, the one that would ultimately compel a discussion neither of them was prepared for. The rain fell steadily on Friday as Brielle uttered the words that surprised everyone, even herself. She discovered Ayana standing beneath the shelter outside the East Gym, waiting for her bus amidst the storm. Most students had already departed for the day. Brielle paused for a moment, her designer boots already wet, her hair beginning to frizz. Ayana noticed her approach, but remained still. I need to speak, Brielle said, her voice quiet. Ayana blinked. Then speak. I was wrong, she said. I'm not saying that for the internet or to fix my reputation. I didn't know how to deal with you, Brielle continued. You were quiet, intelligent. People appreciated you without any effort on your part. That worried me. You don't need to offer an explanation, Ayana stated. Actually, I do, because I invested months believing I had to be everything, constantly. Flawless, boisterous, well-liked. And then you arrived and didn't attempt to be anything other than yourself. Yet people still acknowledged you, as if you were significant. I don't need you to like me, Ayana said softly. I know. That's why it affected me. The rain continued to fall. Ayana folded her arms. You humiliated me. Openly. On multiple occasions. I know, Ayana replied. You caused people to believe I was vulnerable. I initially thought you were, Brielle confessed. But you're not. A silence followed. I've been observing that video, Brielle added. Not the one where you blocked me. The other one. At the gym. You appeared focused. In control. As if nothing could disrupt you. Ayana looked at her. Her expression unreadable. Why now? She asked. Because I finally stopped talking long enough to listen, Brielle responded. At that moment, Ethan appeared, standing a few feet away with his backpack over one shoulder. He didn't interrupt. He simply looked at Ayana, as if assessing the situation. Ayana gave him a slight nod before turning back to Brielle. I don't need an apology. I needed space. You've already taken enough, Brielle said, biting her lip. So we're just done? Ayana stated. We were never anything. You don't have to be the antagonist in your own narrative. However, I am not here to be your path to improvement. Brielle remained silent. There was nothing further to communicate. She turned and proceeded into the rain. Ayana lingered for a moment, simply inhaling. Afterward that evening, she settled on the couch with her mom, wearing warm socks and a throw blanket. How was school? Her mom inquired. Ayana paused. Complex, her mom replied with a smile. Isn't that just life? Ayana chuckled. A gentle, genuine one. Roosevelt faced challenges, yet progress was evident. Mr. Daniels began incorporating essays centered on character development. Students who had previously remained silent were now addressing instances of minor misbehavior. Even the school board initiated a limited program focusing on bullying, student support, and mental health. However, the most significant shift was in the way individuals interacted. They observed each other with curiosity, rather than pity or a focus on social standing. At some point, the quiet began to offer them a lesson. One afternoon, Mackenzie sat beside Ayana in the cafeteria. There was no apology, no casual conversation. Just two girls eating together quietly. It needed nothing more. And Brielle? She hadn't been posting as much lately. She began arriving to class promptly. She joined the yearbook team, working behind the camera, not in front of it. It wasn't about improving her public perception. She simply needed something genuine for a change. Ayana never went viral again. She didn't require it. She possessed what was essential. Her grades, her strength, her boundaries, her voice, even when she chose not to use it. However, the world hadn't forgotten, and neither had she. Certain events don't gain widespread attention. They remain with you. And that's where genuine transformation takes place. 2 months later, Roosevelt High appeared unchanged. Same lockers, same lunch lines, same morning announcements. Yet, a subtle alteration was perceptible. The focus that used to hold the greatest importance. Who possessed the latest shoes? The social gatherings faded. The meaning of respect evolved. It wasn't expressed through enthusiastic applause, boisterous cheers, online likes, or shares. Instead, it manifested in understated moments of genuine connection. For example, when a freshman dropped her books, four students immediately helped her without a word exchanged. Or when a newcomer sat alone, another person simply asked, "You want company?" While imperfections remained, people began to reflect more deeply. There was a deliberate pause before jokes were made, and a focus on checking in rather than immediately joining in. Ayanna remained near the windows in the cafeteria. She continued to wear her hoodie on some days and still carried herself with a sense of self-assuredness. People now acknowledged her with small gestures, a wave, a smile, a casual greeting, not because they sought anything from her, but because they had finally recognized her for who she truly was. Ethan also stayed around. They didn't talk every day, but when they did, their conversations held significance. "You still training?" he asked one day as they walked out of school. "Yeah," she replied. "Every week." "Will she compete again?" She shrugged. "Possibly, or perhaps not. I'm not doing it to win," she explained. "To focus, to stay grounded," she added, smiling. Regarding Brielle, she was still in the process of understanding things. Certain days, she reverted to previous patterns. The sarcasm, the desire for control. However, she would then recognize it, offer apologies when she previously wouldn't have, assist with tasks that went unacknowledged, share in someone else's humor without needing to be the focus. Change isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's subtle, quietly, internally. Mr. Daniels emphasized a point in class one day that resonated with both of them. Respect, he stated, is not something you demand. It's something you earn. Frequently, through how you treat people when you believe no one is observing. Ayanna recorded the words in her notebook, not because she required the reminder, but because it felt like a meaningful return. People ceased inquiring about what truly occurred in that video. It was irrelevant now. They had witnessed the authentic story unfold over weeks, not found in video snippets. Instead, consider the decisions made. These actions carry greater significance than fleeting online sensations. The world continued, as it invariably does. However, certain students at Roosevelt progressed. They gained wisdom, developed empathy, and became slightly more observant. Occasionally, when unnoticed, Ayanna would stop while walking down the hallway, observe her surroundings, and recognize a truth. She remained unchanged, yet those around her had evolved, and that was sufficient. Occasionally, the most impactful decision you can make is remaining authentic, even when all eyes are on you, anticipating collapse. It isn't necessary to be vocal to be acknowledged. It isn't required to struggle to prevail. And it isn't essential to alter yourself to gain respect. Allow your actions to demonstrate. Let your boundaries remain firm. And let your silence convey the significance that clamor cannot. If this story prompted a shift in your perspective regarding how we treat others or redefined your understanding of true strength, please like this video and subscribe. More stories are forthcoming that challenge assumptions and remind us that character isn't developed during times of ease. It's demonstrated when faced with adversity. Thank you for watching. Remain steadfast,